Rachel here. Welcome to my Slow TV Stitchery. Good morning, everybody. I'm still not entirely confident about this pattern, but I am choosing to continue with it on the basis that it may prove to be one of those things that doesn't say yay or nay until it's very nearly finished, if not completely finished. I have had things that I have doubted right up to the final stitch that when I sat back were obviously right, and I couldn't see how I couldn't have seen it before. So 5, 6, 7. So we shall just have to hope that this is another one of those. For those of you who are interested, there was an intriguing documentary on Radio 3 last week, presented by the double bass player Chichi Nwanako, who also founded the Chineke Orchestra. And it was talking about the violinist who actually premiered and was the original manuscript dedicatee of what we now know as Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata, which Kreutzer himself never played. It wasn't written with him in mind. The person for whom it was written and who premiered it with Beethoven, apparently without all of the music written out, so he was having to lean over Beethoven's shoulder to see what he was supposed to be playing. And I've heard things about Beethoven's manuscripts, and I have performed from manuscripts, and it's not easy. And the gentleman in question was a violin virtuoso of mixed race called George Augustus Palgreen Blacktower. And were it not that Beethoven chose, for reasons of patronage and policy, I suppose, to dedicate the first printed edition to Kreutzer, in hopes that Kreutzer would come up with the goods one way or another, we would have been talking about the Blacktower Sonata all these years. And And Blacktower sounds like a very interesting fellow. Another child prodigy of the time, like Beethoven, hauled around Europe to show off his amazing talents to the profit of his family. So, you know, maybe they got along particularly well because they had those experiences in common. Blacktower, however, unlike Beethoven, married money and retired from performance. Or at least we aren't sure, because apparently we know he travelled, and so there may be records of him getting up to all sorts of things around Europe, and until somebody finds those records, we're not going to know what George Augustus Palgreen Blacktower got up to in later life. So, as Chichi Noanoko said, look in your libraries, look in your lofts, see whether you can find some of his music, because he was a composer as well, some evidence of what he got up to. He married money in England. He may have not performed in England out of deference to his wife's family. And performed somewhere else in Europe. He was clearly a fantastic violinist. They spoke to Anne-Sophie Mutter, who is astonished by what Blacktower achieved during the premiere, because she says she doesn't think that she would come anywhere close to being able to get all the notes, never mind anything else, reading from manuscript with no time to prepare. And yet apparently the premiere went exceedingly well. It is very easy to go astray with this pack. Although the advantage of that, of course, is that it will not be over familiar to anyone. For those with an interest in medieval embroidery, I very much doubt anyone will need to have this highlighted, because I suspect we all know about it. But if you don't, and you're interested in medieval embroidery, Tanya Bentham has just produced a fabulous project and instructional book about the early style of Opus Anglicanum, which is primarily based around split stitch in filament silk, and it is absolutely gorgeous, and I imagine very like taking a tutorial from Tanya. Very strong authorial voice. I'm enjoying just reading it. I haven't worked out what I want to do or what design I want to do inspired by hers and using those techniques, but I am sure there will be something. Now then, I just have a little bit to fill in there. You may notice this little knot here. That's where I think the river needs to stretch to give me enough to balance everything. Obviously I won't necessarily have all of it on show when the thing is framed. 3, 6, 7. Whoa! But it is very much easier to frame something if you have more around the edge than you need, as opposed to trying to mask the fact that you didn't stitch quite enough. This is why I ended up stitching an entire hemisphere of river when I was doing Leaving the Tyne, because I wasn't quite sure where the boat was going to go. Beg its pardon, ship. I should know better than that, shouldn't I? Or how much of it was going to be where, and I didn't want to be fretting about details of covering the river. So it was very much easier, given that the placement was something that was going to have to be worked out once I had the pieces to place. Very, very much easier to just work an entire solid hemisphere of river and just live with the fact that a lot of my stitching was going to be covered up by other stitching. And the same thing goes for framing bits around the edge. It's so much easier to decide, actually no, I don't need to show everyone all of this, I just want this bit on show, rather than trying to squeeze the last little bits out of something. Two, 3. I've got too many stitches here. Yes, I have. After this, all this expanse of this stitch, you would think I would be getting it right by now. But as I've been thinking about framing instead, I suspect while I'm working on this, I am thinking about how I might frame it when it's finished. trying to think something simple. Because I think all of the complication needs to come from the stump work pieces of the priory. Which, after all, is complication enough for anyone. Well, you would think. That's all for this session. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!